Now, first off, I have to ask: are you a JG Ballard fan?
Um, Interestingly, not so much actually. I'm sorry to disappoint.
Oh, you have disappointed terribly because just all the car references, the things turning into crystal. I mean, these are all pure and simple J.G. Ballard references.
Right, I clearly have to go there a bit more then.
You do, yeah, because I think everything you've done, pretty much. I
Okay.
think Ballard, Ballard, Ballard.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So what has inspired I mean, I know you're a tinkerer,
Hmm.
but what has inspired the car motif
Oh,
as
look,
one?
I grew up with cars, so it's always been like, my father was a sort of, yeah, he took me to drag races when I was a little kid, and, sort of was always part of my life. And yeah, and it sort of snuck its way into my sculpture practice as well. But I'm kind of interested in lots of everyday objects, and that sort of comes through my whole practice. But my practice
Yeah.
is also, like everyone, it sort of reflects where we're at in moments, and when I'm going through a particular bout of car obsession, it tends to pop up in my work as well. So yeah.
So when you start doing strange things with taps, does that mean your bathroom's up the creek?
Yeah, that's it. Plumbing shit. That's it. Got to go there.
But do you respond to everyday circumstance?
Yeah, absolutely. So within my whole, with the history of my practice, I can, we could point to a work and I could tell you pretty much what was going on there and why that work's sort of gone the way it has. It's but like everyone's. So it's a lot of, we all feed off what's going on in our everydays, and because I use such recognizable motifs, you could say, it's nice little signifiers where I was at. Yeah.
Well, I also sort of, as I've looked at over and over, I'm also reminded a bit of the filmmaking of David Lynch and David Cronenberg. Are
Yep.
they influences?
Absolutely. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. I've said this a number of times to people, but I kind of like the idea that my work sort of, it occupies this moment where it's kind of a glitch in reality almost. So,
Yeah.
like there's this dude on the conveyor belt as the things come through, and he was kind of on the nod as one of my pieces came through, and it snuck past. And it's so, because I'm always sort of I'm always striving to create these impossible possibilities. So I'm kind of interested in this idea that's kind of possible, but obviously it's not. So the intervention's so seamless, it could almost be real, but it's like the tap you were talking about. You may or may, but that piece is actually completely carved out of a single piece of marble, and then I've carefully hand painted the marble to look exactly like the brass tap that it was, and it's 1-to-1. And so not only is this play of this crystalline sort of thing happening from coming out of the tap, but it's also this play of where the real material is and what isn't. And that's a new direction in where I'm heading with my work, this sort of material play as well. I've always taken the existing object and modified it, whereas I'm sort of going off on this bit of a tangent at the moment where I'm playing with that impossible materiality as well, if you like. So yeah.
I mean, obviously the question is, why the crystal? Why is water suddenly turning into crystal? And just like one of the cars, the work that we've been looking at with the Volkswagen, looks like it's covered in a kind of strange pink fungus.
Yeah.
So this kind of change in materiality, what inspires that?
Yeah, I'm kind of interested in the geological sort of twist. With the cars, I'll talk about the car specifically. So with the Volkswagen, I'm kind of interested in how so much stuff in our contemporary life is made of dinosaurs and rocks, so oil and ground up, the steel comes from stone, and I'm kind of interested in this play of everything coming from the earth and going back to the earth, hence the geologies within the piece, if you get what I mean.
Yes. Yeah.
I kind of like the ideas that we're driving around in rotten dinosaurs and rocks. I'm fascinated in that idea and especially because at the end of the day, I'm a self-confessed car guy. I restore cars, I've got a couple of classic cars, but I understand this sort of. I've always been interested in where shit comes from, and that's what sort of started. Like you mentioned, I'm a tinkerer. Well, everything, so much of what I do is just about pulling shit apart and putting it together again, and I love that. You know, just the inner workings of things and origins of things and how things work, and you know, the mechanics of stuff. It's a big part of what I do. You know, I restore stuff. I'm building my own house. I restore cars and I make artwork. So everything's about, pulling things apart and figuring shit out. And yeah.
Well, in a way, you are in fact actively recycling.
Yeah, sure. We'll go with that.
So with that NotFair work, is that the plan? You know, given one day we'll have a NotFair, is it the plan to have the Volkswagen in all its glory brought down to Melbourne?
I hope so. That's halfway through it. Yeah, no, we're thoroughly into it. So far it's working. I've had a really good boon with bonnets at my local smash repairers. So I go there and I raid their skip for car panels, because we've got the inverted Volkswagen, so it's on its roof now.
I'm often reminded when I look at the work of that kind of moment in David Cronenberg's The Fly, when poor old Seth Brundle, you know, ends up a completely different creature to what he expected. And your works are a bit like that. I mean, your Volkswagen would never have dreamt of waking up to be a giant pink bug.
No, not at all. And as I said, it's these weird, impossible possibilities. So so as I was saying before, so it's on its roof at the moment. We're halfway through making these kind of fractal geological growths, but yeah, for sure, it's I don't know, is it an unfortunate demise or is it a lucky little thing? I don't know yet. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah. So what has inspired these strange speculations? I mean, there's a bit of, you know, is there a literary component? Is there a dream component? Well, where does this come from? It is odd. Let's be honest.
Yeah. This is my okay. So Magali, my partner, asks. Yeah, she's always going, where does this shit come from? And I actually struggle to answer the question. It's just it just sort of it just pops up. But there is a thread, you know, like each work feeds off the last. You know, the fractal stuff. So you know, the sort of playing with facets, that came from a work I did for McClelland years ago. Like, it was a garden shed, and it sort of morphs into this kind of weird, faceted. And I was actually taking the piss out of it.
I remember the work.
At the time, it popped in my head because I was taking the piss out of architecture, and then it kind of just became a thing, and off we went with it. It just depends on the moment. So I suppose sometimes the object feeds the idea, sometimes the form feeds the object, but mostly it's the object, because as I was saying earlier, it relates to a moment in time usually. So I'll become like the Volkswagen. It's been sitting in my paddock. I live on a property in central Victoria, and as all good properties do, it has a junkyard, which is very important in regional living. And so it's been sitting in my junkyard for years, and I've wanted to do something with it for years, and it hadn't quite come to me. And then I was just up there one day, and just boom, there it was. It needs to go on its roof and grow something out of its belly. And there's look, at the end of the day, there's no rigorous research sort of development thing. It's just shit that pops in my head. You know,
it's beautiful.
Yeah. So that's but it is very much context of time. That's probably the best answer.
Jason, you worry me.
Why is this?
It's your imagination. Another artist that obviously has been playing around with cars and the car motif and similar sort of changes is Matthew Barney. Is he something of an inspiration or at all? Or?
In art school, I thought he was fucking cool. For sure. And I love the movie with the demolition derby downstairs and the. No, absolutely. His work's great. I mean. He's not one of the top lists, but for sure, I dig his stuff. Yeah.
Well, I've read you've referenced both Boyce and Duchamp as heroes, I suppose you'd say. Is that, who else would you count in that?
Yeah, I dig on a lot of the stuff. Obviously, Erwin Verm does. I think his that's pretty cool. I like the big name stuff we're talking here. The tongue in cheek of Maurizio Catalan, is pretty cool. There's quite a few artists in there who would be obvious choices for me.
Yeah. It's strange. I've just been reading a book called Alice Knott by Blake Butler. Fantastic book. But it's basically about people sort of coming down with the pandemic. I'll plug the novel. It's people coming down with a pandemic which makes them feel they have to destroy art. Okay. And unfortunately, the book has this whole sort of horrendously murderous moment of one moment or another. They're burning a Van Gogh, or they're bashing the shit out of Goya's Satan eating his sons. And it's just kind of like, have we reached a point in our culture where art is sort of so distanced from ourselves? Are the museums sort of growing more distant to our society? Heavy question, but it's just been sparked by this book.
Yeah, no, I've had this conversation a lot about what the role of art is these days. I've consciously made works, especially public artworks, which you do. You think about your audience, right? And there was a work I made for the city of Ballarat, which the work occupies a laneway, and the laneway's in between Bridge Mall and Kmart, right? I don't know anyone who knows Ballarat knows Bridge Mall, and it's one of those horrible 80s where they blocked off the street and paved it and made like a wind tunnel with shit shops, and then it goes through the laneway to Kmart. So you can imagine the type of people who are like, heading from Best and Less to Kmart kind of thing. And so I was thinking about consciously thinking about the audience for this work. And what I ended up doing was because it's an old laneway, I looked at the kind of incidental architecture and the busted bits of walls and the whatever else, and I inserted these tiny little sort of, I hate to use the word surreal, but they're surreal little vignettes of moments in time. And it's Time Lane as well, because I kind of wanted to engage with people who, walk through that space. So I made these sort of kooky little sort of moments in time that were inserted into the walls. You had to look for them as well. They're tiny. They're all made in steel. And from what I hear, it works really well. And obviously Instagram and places like that are a good sounding board as well. I kind of didn't cater for the art audience so much at all. I mean, obviously it ticks the boxes for certain contemporary art ideas as well, but I was more interested in how the Ballarat, mum heading from Best and Less to Kmart with her stroller was going to interact with their kids. And it works on that level. I kind of love the idea of Joe Plummer going, "Fuck, that's grouse." That for me is like a total hit. And obviously I choose the Kingswood. Okay, so I did a sculpture called Glory Days, which again was shown at McClelland, and it was also shown at Ballarat Art Gallery and a few other things. But it's also been shown at car shows, and it's been shown at several other car-related events, and it pops up constantly on the internet, on car websites and Photoshop or not and all that sort of stuff. And I reckon that's great because it's engaging a whole audience who would never otherwise engage in what we do.
I love that. Yeah.
So do I. I think a lot of art misses an opportunity to really engage in a broad audience because, I hate to say it, but it can get pretty intimidating sometimes, the contemporary art world. And I think that's a shame. Yeah.
Do you think one of the problems, I never went to university until very recently. Yeah. And I got a scholarship to a PhD, but I never attended university before then. Mm-hmm. But my gut feeling was always that all the language was taken over by academe and by a kind of strange, socio-political bent that alienated Joe the plumber. or, you know, Mary the electrician. And I'm going like, well, why can't all these people enter the dialogue? Yeah. But the art world seems to have closed itself into a kind of, and NotFair is very much about this. I mean, it's free. Let Joe Blogs come. We don't care. Yep. It's just let people experience what it's like to interact with an artwork just by looking and talking about it. And I think the art world feels, to me, like it's just overly intellectualized.
Yeah, look, we're on shaky ground here when it comes to the art world, Ash, but I couldn't agree with you more. Like, I could not agree with you more. It shits me that, look, I strongly believe, right, that art should occupy a space that can create a fucking revolution. Now, that revolution could be a tiny little, like, epiphany for the viewer or whatever, but you know, it should always think about its audience, and it should always place itself in a position where, you know, anyone can have a complete moment. At the end of the day, I hang out with blokes who build hot rods, and I hang out with artists who show really incredible work, and I hang out with people who, you know, fix stationary engines from the 1930s. And I've got this really broad range of people that, you know, I bang around with. And I love the idea that I give them opportunities to look at shit. And it's not just with my own practice, like the gallery I run, Stockroom, as well. We're really interested in the way public can interface what we do. And we offer lots of ins within that space for people to engage with contemporary artwork. But, you know, it's still engagement, and it still creates dialogue, and it's such an important opportunity for the wider audience.